For a long time, I thought my marriage to Jessica was solid, unshakable, even. We'd been together for nearly 8 years, married for 5, and while things weren't perfect, when are they ever? I had no reason to believe anything was seriously wrong. Or at least I thought I didn't. It started small like these things always do. Jessica began spending more time on her phone. Nothing outrageous, but enough for me to notice. At first, I chalked it up to work or her scrolling social media. She's in marketing, after all, and her job often requires her to be glued to her device. But then came the late nights. She started working overtime or heading out to meet friends from her old college days. I'd tease her about it, trying to sound casual, and she'd roll her eyes, saying something like, "God, Tyler, not everything's a conspiracy." I let it go. I didn't want to be that guy, the overbearing husband, constantly paranoid or accusing. She deserved her independence, right? Besides, I trusted her. We built our relationship on honesty, or so I thought. I mean, she was my wife, my best friend. But over time, the little things began piling up. She'd stay out later than usual, her phone always buzzing with texts that she suddenly didn't want me to see. And her excuses? Oh man, the excuses. They were becoming more and more flimsy. One time, she claimed she'd been stuck in traffic for over 2 hours after a dinner with her old friend Emily. I didn't question it until I checked the GPS on her car later. I know, but I had to. She wasn't even near the restaurant she said she'd been at. When I asked about it, she brushed it off with some convoluted story about getting lost and taking the scenic route home. Scenic route? At 11:30 at night? It didn't sit right with me. But still, I let it slide. Why? Because I loved her. Because I didn't want to admit that maybe, just maybe, things weren't as perfect as I had fooled myself into believing. Besides, I had no hard proof. Just a gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't right, that I tried to bury my doubts, convincing myself I was overthinking. But once you plant the seed, it's impossible to unsee the cracks. Jessica's behavior kept changing in subtle ways, and every new coincidence only added fuel to the fire. One day, while we were eating dinner, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and immediately flipped it face down on the table, a move she'd never done before. I don't know why it stung so much, but it did. It wasn't like I made a habit of snooping through her messages, but her sudden need for secrecy made my chest tighten. "Who's that?" I asked, keeping my tone casual as I stabbed at my pasta. She didn't even look up. "Oh, just Lauren from work." Lauren again. Jessica had been mentioning this new coworker for weeks now. How funny she was, how they clicked instantly, and how they'd started grabbing lunch together. I didn't think much of it at first. Jessica's a social butterfly. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lauren might not even exist. Later that night, while Jessica was in the shower, her phone lit up again. This time, I couldn't stop myself. My hands moved before my brain could object. I reached over and glanced at the screen. The notification was from someone saved as Lenny Jim, and the message read, "Still thinking about last night." My stomach dropped. I tried to keep calm, to rationalize. Maybe this was innocent. Maybe Lenny was a trainer from her gym, and they'd had some harmless conversation about workout plans or whatever. I mean, Jessica had been going to the gym a lot lately. But why the winky face? And why would she lie about Lauren if this was just gym talk? The seed of doubt grew roots. The next morning, I decided to test her. "Hey, do you want to grab dinner Friday night? We haven't gone out in a while." Jessica looked up from her coffee, her face brightening. "Oh, I can't, babe. I'm meeting Lauren. She's been having a rough week, and I promised her we'd catch up over drinks." I nodded, playing along, but inside something snapped. Lauren. Again. When Friday rolled around, Jessica spent extra time getting ready. More than usual. She curled her hair, wore her favorite black dress, and spritzed on the perfume she only breaks out for special occasions. "Wow, you're looking amazing," I said, masking my sarcasm. "You sure you're not going on a date?" She laughed, brushing it off. "Don't be ridiculous. Lauren's going through a breakup. I just want to cheer her up." I smiled and kissed her goodbye, but as soon as the door closed behind her, I sprang into action. I opened our shared laptop. Jessica wasn't exactly tech-savvy and often left her email signed in. As I suspected, her inbox was still open. I searched for Lenny. There it was. An email chain between her and someone named Leonard Davis. Not a trainer. Not even remotely gym-related. One message from him read, "I can't stop thinking about your laugh, Jess. I'll pick you up at 7. Can't wait to see you in that dress you mentioned." It felt like a sucker punch to the gut. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with rage and disbelief. I wanted to scream, throw something, do something, but I didn't. Instead, I closed the laptop and sat in silence, my mind racing. Jessica wasn't meeting Lauren. She was meeting Leonard. And suddenly, everything, the late nights, the secrecy, the gym visits, clicked into place. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was proof. And I had no idea what to do next, that I sat there for what felt like hours, replaying every moment from the past few months in my head. The late-night texts, the new obsession with her appearance, the excuses, it all led to Leonard. My wife was cheating on me. The reality of it hit like a freight train, but anger was quickly replaced by something worse. Heartbreak. This was Jessica, the woman I promised forever to. How could she do this? How long had it been going on? And why, for the love of everything, would she risk everything we built for some guy named Leonard? I debated calling her right then and there, but a part of me knew it wouldn't work. She'd just deny it, spin some story, maybe even make me feel like I was crazy. That's when it hit me. I needed to catch her in the act. I wasn't going to let her weasel out of this with half-baked excuses. No, this time, I was going to see the truth with my own eyes. Jessica had taken an Uber, probably to avoid the awkwardness of explaining where she was really going if I happened to glance at her car's GPS later. But she wasn't counting on me being 2 steps ahead. I pulled up her Uber receipt. Thankfully, we shared an account and saw the address. A fancy restaurant downtown. Leonard wasn't pulling any punches. I grabbed my jacket, jumped in my car, and drove to the restaurant, fueled by adrenaline and heartbreak. On the way there, I tried to prepare myself for what I might see. Would they be holding hands? Laughing? Kissing? My stomach twisted at the thought. No matter how many scenarios I ran through, I knew nothing could prepare me for the actual sight of my wife with another man. When I got to the restaurant, I parked across the street and scanned the outdoor seating area. It didn't take long to spot her. She was sitting at a corner table with a guy who looked like he walked straight out of a magazine, tall, broad shoulders, the kind of smile that probably got him everything he wanted. And there was Jessica, leaning in close, laughing in that way she used to laugh with me. I felt my fists clench on instinct, but I stayed in the car, forcing myself to stay calm. Storming over there would just make a scene, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. The flash was off, but the act still made my hands shake. I took another, zooming in on their faces. There was undeniable proof. As I watched, Leonard reached across the table and took Jessica's hand in his. She didn't pull away. If anything, she held on tighter. My heart broke all over again. This wasn't just some fling or a mistake. This was something deeper, something intentional. I stayed long enough to see him pay the bill and walk her to the curb. They hugged, too long for it to be platonic, before an Uber pulled up and Jessica climbed in. Leonard stayed behind, watching her leave with a look that made my blood boil. When she got home that night, she was all smiles, like she hadn't just spent the evening stabbing me in the back. "How was your night?" she asked, casually dropping her purse on the counter. "Fine," I said, barely looking at her. My heart was pounding, my palms sweating, but I kept my voice steady. "How was Lauren?" "Oh, she said with a shrug. Typical girl talk. Lots of wine, lots of venting. She's such a mess right now." If I hadn't been so angry, I might have been impressed by how easily the lies rolled off her tongue. She was good, too good. But this time, I wasn't falling for it. "Glad you could be there for her," I said, forcing a smile. She smiled back, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. As she went to bed, I stayed up, staring at the pictures on my phone. This wasn't just evidence, it was ammunition. The question now was when and how I'd use it. That night, I barely slept. Jessica lay next to me, breathing steadily, her face serene as if she didn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with anger and sadness. The pictures on my phone felt like a loaded weapon, but I wasn't ready to fire yet. If I was going to confront her, it had to count. There'd be no room for her to manipulate her way out of this. By the morning, I had a plan. I wasn't going to confront her immediately. No, I wanted to gather more. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Was Leonard just some fling, or was this something bigger? How long had it been going on? Were there others? The thought of her betraying me repeatedly twisted the knife even deeper. Jessica went about her morning routine as usual. Coffee, light makeup, scrolling her phone, but I couldn't stop watching her. Every smile she gave me, every casual laugh, felt like a slap in the face. Was she thinking about Leonard while she kissed me goodbye? Was she laughing to herself about how clueless I was? Big plans today? I asked, leaning casually against the counter as she slipped on her shoes. Just work, she said with a shrug, grabbing her bag. And then maybe a gym session after. Don't wait up. It might run late. The gym. Sure. Have fun, I said, forcing a smile as she walked out the door. As soon as she left, I went to work. First, I logged into our shared phone account. Jessica wasn't exactly careful with her digital trail, so it didn't take long to pull up her call and text history. Leonard's number popped up more times than I could count. Often during hours, she claimed she was working late or out with friends. A quick reverse search confirmed it was him. I also noticed something odd, a second number, one I didn't recognize, but it appeared frequently alongside Leonard's. Curious, I did some digging and discovered it belonged to a burner phone. Jessica had bought it a few months back, around the same time her behavior started changing. My stomach churned. A burner phone? This wasn't just casual cheating. This was calculated. She had a whole system in place to cover her tracks, and yet here I was, unraveling it piece by piece. I decided to test the burner phone theory. While Jessica was at work, I called the number. It rang twice before going to voicemail, and the generic automated voice confirmed it was an active line. A chill ran down my spine. I knew she wouldn't pick up, but hearing that confirmation made it all too real. My wife was living a double life. That night, Jessica came home later than usual, claiming her gym session had run long. Her hair wasn't sweaty, and her makeup was still perfectly intact, but I didn't call her out. Not yet. Instead, I just smiled and asked, "Good workout?" "Yeah, it was great," she said, grabbing a glass of water. "I'm beat." She didn't seem to notice how hard I was staring at her, how tightly I was gripping my glass. I wanted to scream at her, ask how she could sit here lying to my face, but I swallowed it. Losing my cool now wouldn't help. I needed more. So I stayed silent, playing the role of the oblivious husband while I pieced together the truth. The next step was following her. If she thought her burner phone and secret meetings would keep her safe, she was about to learn otherwise. It was time to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. The next morning, Jessica left for work as usual, giving me her trademark goodbye kiss. One that now felt like a cheap knockoff of what it used to be. As soon as she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys, determined to follow her. I knew her routine by heart. She'd head to the office downtown, park in the same lot, and spend the day in her marketing job. But if my hunch was right, her work wasn't always what she claimed. I parked a few blocks away from her building, watching as she got out of her car and walked inside, wearing her usual blazer and heels. Hours passed. I questioned myself, wondering if I was overreacting or if I'd wasted the day. But then, around lunchtime, everything changed. Jessica didn't head to the sandwich shop across the street, where she usually grabbed lunch. Instead, she walked briskly toward a coffee shop a few blocks down. My pulse quickened as I started my car and trailed her, careful to keep my distance. She didn't go inside the coffee shop. Instead, she stopped at a sleek black car idling out front. The passenger door opened, and she slid in without hesitation. I couldn't see the driver's face at first, but then he leaned slightly forward to pull into traffic, and there he was, Leonard. The sight of him sent a jolt of rage through me. His stupid, perfect hair, his smug grin, the way he casually reached over to touch her leg like they'd done this 100 times before. It took everything in me not to tailgate him, drag him out of the car, and demand an explanation. But no, that wouldn't get me what I needed. They drove for a while, eventually stopping at a small boutique hotel just outside the city. I parked down the street, heart pounding, as they stepped out of the car. Jessica laughed at something he said, flipping her hair in a way I hadn't seen her do in years. It was a gut punch to watch her light up like that for him, not me. I snapped a few photos of them walking into the hotel together, her hand brushing his as they disappeared through the entrance. For nearly an hour, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I debated whether I should burst in and catch them red-handed or keep biding my time. But what good would it do to confront them now? I needed more than just a public outburst. I needed to make sure there was no way for Jessica to twist the truth. When they finally came out, they were smiling like teenagers sneaking out of prom. I took more photos, documenting every touch, every lingering glance. Leonard drove her back to the office, and I followed until she was safely back inside. Once I got home, I reviewed the photos and the timeline I'd pieced together over the past few days. The burner phone, the secret lunches, the boutique hotel. It all pointed to one inescapable truth. My wife was having a full-blown affair. Still, a part of me hesitated. I couldn't just confront her with photos and accusations. She'd find a way to spin it, to make it seem like I was overreacting. No, I needed more. Something undeniable. So, I decided to up my game. It was time to call in some help. It didn't take long for me to figure out who could help me pull this off. My buddy Chris. Chris wasn't just a close friend. He was also a tech wizard. We'd bonded back in college over a shared love for gaming, but these days his skills extended far beyond setting up a killer Wi-Fi network. I knew he'd be the perfect person to help me get the upper hand. I called him that evening, keeping my tone casual. "Hey, man, you busy tonight?" "Not really," he said. "What's up?" "I need a favor." Sensitive favor." Chris chuckled. "Oh boy, what kind of trouble are you in? Do I need to bring bail money?" "Not exactly," I said, forcing a laugh. "It's about Jessica. Something's going on, and I need to know the truth." Chris paused, his joking tone disappearing. "What kind of something?" I explained everything. The late nights, the burner phone, Leonard, and what I'd seen at the hotel. Chris didn't interrupt, but when I finished, his voice was steady. "Okay, what do you need me to do?" "I need to see her messages," I admitted, my voice tight. "The ones she deletes, the ones on that burner phone. I need to know exactly what she's saying to him. If this goes south, I want airtight proof." Chris didn't hesitate. "I'm on it. Bring me whatever devices you can access. I'll set up some tracking software. We'll get what you need." The next day, while Jessica was at work, I grabbed her old laptop, the one she rarely used anymore, and her tablet. Both were synced to her email and her cloud accounts. I didn't want to risk touching the burner phone just yet, but I figured this was a good start. Chris worked quickly. Within a few hours, he'd installed software that would capture messages, photos, and even deleted content. He showed me how to access everything from a secure server. "You're going to see everything she does," he said. "But be ready. It's probably worse than you think." He wasn't wrong. By the next day, I started seeing messages flood into the server. Texts from Leonard, flirty and explicit, filled with inside jokes and plans for their next rendezvous. Jessica's replies were just as damning. She told him she felt alive with him, that he made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. It was a gut punch every time her name popped up. One message from Leonard stood out. "I wish we didn't have to sneak around. I want to be with you, Jess. For real." Her response came minutes later. "Me too. But Tyler would never let me go without a fight. He'd make it messy." I read those words over and over, my vision blurring with rage. She wasn't just cheating. She was actively planning her escape, and from the sound of it, she didn't care how much damage she caused in the process. Chris called me that evening to check in. "How's it going on your end?" "It's bad," I said, my voice hollow. "Worse than I expected." "Do you want to stop?" he asked, hesitating. "Sometimes knowing too much can be worse." "No," I said firmly. "I need to see this through. I need to know everything." Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about getting control of my life back, one piece of truth at a time. But as I kept digging, I realized the worst was yet to come. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became, and the uglier the truth was. Jessica and Leonard weren't just sneaking around behind my back. They were building something step by step, designed to tear my life apart. Through her messages, I learned that Leonard wasn't just her affair partner. He was her first love, a guy she'd dated back in college before we even met. The one who got away. He'd apparently slid back into her life after a chance encounter at a work event months ago. From the way they talked, it was like they'd picked up right where they left off, only this time with the added excitement of deception. There were more messages about their plans for the future. One that chilled me to the core read. Once Tyler finds out, we'll have to act fast. He won't take this lying down. Jessica had replied, I know. I'm already looking at apartments. But we can't do anything until I've sorted the finances. I don't want him to screw me over in court. The finances. That's where things took a turn. As I read more, I found out that Jessica had been siphoning money from our joint account into a private one. Leonard had been coaching her on how to do it without raising red flags. She'd even set up a meeting with a divorce lawyer, one Leonard had recommended. I felt the rage bubble up, hotter and more dangerous than before. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. Jessica wasn't planning on coming clean or asking for a fresh start. She was setting me up to fail. They were planning to bleed me dry, leaving me with nothing but the wreckage of our marriage. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal of her body or the betrayal of her mind. This wasn't a woman who felt trapped in an unhappy marriage and stumbled into someone else's arms. This was a woman who was actively, methodically dismantling the life we'd built together while I slept next to her every night. That night, as Jessica got ready for bed, she kissed me on the cheek, completely unaware of the storm inside me. You've been quiet today, she said, pulling back the covers. Just a lot on my mind, I said, forcing a smile. She nodded, completely unbothered. Well, don't stay up too late. You've been burning the candle at both ends. I watched her roll over and fall asleep, my mind racing. I had enough evidence now to confront her, to blow her lies wide open. But something in me hesitated. I wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet. I needed more leverage. If I confronted her now, she'd find a way to manipulate me. She always did. But if I played this smart, if I waited for the perfect moment, there'd be no way for her to twist the narrative. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow, I'd take the next step. And when I did, Jessica wouldn't know what hit her. For now, I lay next to her in the darkness, pretending to sleep, while she dreamed of a life that didn't include me. The next morning, Jessica left early, claiming she had a team meeting downtown. I didn't bother asking questions. At this point, I knew better than to expect the truth. After she was gone, I called Chris again. I've got enough to confront her, I said, pacing the living room. But I want to make sure she doesn't see it coming. I need to control how this plays out. Chris sighed. You're walking a fine line, man. What's your plan? I'm going to let her dig her own grave, I replied. If she's really planning to leave me and screw me over, I want her to think she's still in control. The moment she feels safe, that's when I'll strike. We went over the details of what I already had, the photos, the messages, the evidence of her financial manipulation. It was airtight, but I wanted to push her further, to see if she'd cross an even bigger line when she thought I was still oblivious. Chris suggested adding another layer to the trap. If she's trying to bleed you dry, start acting clueless. Let her think you're distracted. Maybe even give her more rope to hang herself with. The idea made me sick, but it was brilliant. I needed Jessica to feel comfortable enough to make her next move. That day, I started putting on the act. I texted her during lunch, something I hadn't done in weeks, and said, "Miss you. Let's do a date night soon." Her response was almost immediate. Of course. Maybe this weekend. Love you. It was disgusting, knowing she could lie so easily. But the friendlier I got, the more relaxed she became. Over the next few days, I watched as her messages with Leonard grew bolder. She told him how relieved she was that I wasn't catching on and that she was almost ready to make the jump. Every time I saw her, she smiled like nothing was wrong. At night, she'd curl up next to me, telling me how busy her day had been. I played along, laughing at her jokes, asking about work, pretending like I hadn't been tracking her every move. Then came the moment I was waiting for. Late one afternoon, Chris sent me a text. She's on the burner phone. You need to see this. I logged into the tracking server and read the latest messages. Leonard had texted, "Booked the hotel for Saturday night. Everything's set." Jessica replied, Perfect. I'll let Tyler think I'm going out with Lauren again. He won't even notice. That was it. That was the moment I knew this was going to end on my terms. I texted Chris back. We're moving forward. I'm done playing her game. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to catch her red-handed. And this time, there would be no way for her to weasel out of it. Saturday was only a couple of days away, but it felt like an eternity. As I waited, I started preparing for the fallout. I called a lawyer, laying out the evidence I'd collected and asking for advice. I wasn't going to let Jessica take another cent from me, no matter how hard she tried. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was ready. Jessica left around 6 p.m., dressed to the nines, claiming she was meeting Lauren for a much-needed girls' night. I kissed her goodbye, my stomach turning as I watched her drive away. Then I grabbed my keys. It was time. As soon as Jessica left, I grabbed the folder with all the evidence, screenshots, photos, and financial documents, and headed out. My destination wasn't the hotel, at least not right away. I made a quick stop at Leonard's wife's house. Her name was Vanessa, and though we'd only met a handful of times at mutual events, I knew enough about her to find her on social media. She seemed like a kind woman, always posting about her kids and their family vacations. She had no idea the man she called her husband was sneaking around with mine. When she answered the door, she looked surprised, but not suspicious. Tyler? Hey, what's up? I need to talk to you about Leonard, I said, cutting straight to the point. It's urgent. Her expression shifted, and she stepped aside to let me in. Is he okay? What's going on? I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to break it to her. Vanessa, I'm really sorry to do this, but your husband is having an affair with my wife. Her face paled. What are you talking about? I handed her the folder. It's all there. Messages, photos, everything. She opened it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the pages. I watched as disbelief turned to anger, and then to something that looked like heartbreak. When she finally looked up, her voice was shaky. How long? Months, I said quietly. They're meeting at a hotel tonight. I can give you the address if you want to see it for yourself. She nodded, swallowing hard. I want to be there. I need to see it with my own eyes. Part of me felt guilty for dragging her into this mess, but another part knew she deserved the truth just as much as I did. We drove to the hotel separately, arriving just before 7 p.m. I parked a few spots down from the entrance, waiting for Vanessa to join me. When she got out of her car, her face was set in a grim mask of determination. You ready for this? I asked, though the answer was obvious. She nodded. Let's end this. We walked into the lobby together, Vanessa gripping the folder tightly like a shield. The receptionist barely glanced at us as we stepped into the elevator and rode up to the floor Leonard had mentioned in his texts. My heart was pounding as we approached the door to their room. I could hear muffled laughter from inside, Jessica's voice unmistakable. Vanessa raised a hand to knock, but I stopped her. Wait, I whispered. Let me record this first. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and gave her a nod. She pounded on the door, her fist loud and deliberate. The laughter inside stopped abruptly. After a few seconds, the door opened, and there he was, Leonard, looking confused and slightly annoyed. His face dropped the moment he saw Vanessa. Vanessa? What are you? She didn't let him finish. Move, she snapped, pushing past him. I stepped in behind her, my phone still recording, and there she was, Jessica, sitting on the bed, her face frozen in shock. She wasn't even fully dressed, wearing only a silk robe that wasn't hers. Tyler, she stammered, her face going pale. What are you doing here? I ignored her and turned to Leonard, who looked like he was ready to jump out the window. You must be Leonard, I said, my voice ice cold. Nice to finally meet you. Vanessa, meanwhile, was tearing into her husband. How could you? After everything? After our family? Leonard tried to stammer out some excuse, but she cut him off with a venomous glare. Don't. Just don't. I know everything, Leonard. I have proof. You're done. Jessica turned to me, tears already welling up in her eyes. Tyler, please. This isn't what it looks like. I couldn't help but laugh. Really, Jess? Because it looks exactly like what I thought it was. She started sobbing, covering her face with her hands. It was a mistake. I was lonely, and you were always so busy. Don't. I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't you dare blame this on me. You've been lying to my face for months. Stealing money. Plotting to leave me. And for what? Him. Leonard flinched, but I didn't care. This wasn't about him anymore. You don't understand, Jessica tried again, but I cut her off. No, you don't understand, I said, holding up my phone. This is all on record, Jess. Everything. You want to lie? To spin this into some sob story about how I neglected you? Go ahead. But I've got proof, and I'm not letting you walk away from this without consequences. Vanessa turned to me, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Let's go. We've seen enough. We left them there, their protests fading into the hallway as the elevator doors closed. Outside, Vanessa turned to me, her face hard. What's your next move? I exhaled, the weight of the confrontation finally hitting me. Burn everything down, I said simply. And I meant it. The drive home felt surreal, like I was floating above my own body. I couldn't get the image of Jessica sitting on that hotel bed out of my head. The way she looked caught, humiliated, and desperate all at once. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered her lies, the betrayal, and the months of planning she'd done behind my back. Whatever sympathy I felt evaporated quickly. When I got home, I didn't wait for Jessica. I went straight to my computer and started compiling everything. The photos of her and Leonard, the messages, the financial transfers she thought I didn't notice. By the time I was done, I had a binder full of evidence ready to hand over to my lawyer. But I wasn't just going to stop there. Jessica wasn't getting away clean, not after everything she'd done. Later that night, Jessica came home. She walked in quietly, like a thief sneaking back to the scene of the crime. I was sitting on the couch, binder in hand, waiting for her. She froze when she saw me. Tyler, I can explain, she started, her voice trembling. I raised a hand, cutting her off. Don't bother. I've heard enough. Her eyes darted to the binder on my lap, and her face fell. What's that? Proof, I said coldly. Everything you've been doing. The texts, the photos, the money you've been siphoning from our accounts. It's all here, Jessica. Every lie, every betrayal. She sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I don't know, Tyler. I was lonely. And Leonard. Stop, I snapped. Don't you dare play the victim here. You weren't just cheating on me, Jess. You were planning to leave me broke and humiliated. And for what? Some guy who can't even keep his own marriage together. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't care. I couldn't. I didn't know how to fix things, she said weakly. We've been drifting apart for so long, and I didn't think you even noticed. I laughed bitterly. Fix things? By sleeping with another man? By stealing from me? You didn't want to fix anything, Jess. You wanted out, and you didn't care how much damage you caused along the way. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Tyler, please. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Right, I said, standing up. Now you're ready to work on this? After you've been lying to my face for months? After you've made me feel like a fool in my own home? No, it's too late. Her face crumpled as I walked toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, her voice panicked. To make sure you don't get another dime from me, I said, grabbing the binder and my keys. You've already taken enough. And with that, I left. The next morning, I was sitting across from my lawyer, Monica, in her sleek office downtown. The binder sat between us, a damning compilation of Jessica's lies and betrayals. Monica flipped through it carefully, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the messages, bank transfers, and photos. This, she said, tapping one of the screenshots, is gold. She's toast. Between the financial fraud and the infidelity, you're in a strong position. I'll make sure she doesn't walk away with anything she doesn't deserve. Hearing those words was a relief, but it didn't erase the knot in my stomach. Jessica hadn't just cheated on me. She meticulously planned to ruin me. The thought of her sitting down with Leonard, plotting my financial destruction, still made my blood boil. Monica gave me a reassuring smile. We'll get started immediately. The first step is filing for divorce and freezing all your shared assets. That way, she can't move any more money around while this plays out. Good, I said. She's already done enough damage. Monica paused, studying me. Tyler, I have to ask, are you prepared for this to get ugly? Because with what you've shown me, she might try to fight back out of desperation. I nodded. Let her. I'm ready. Later that afternoon, I went to the bank to make sure everything was locked down. It was satisfying, in a dark way, to know that Jessica's little schemes were about to hit a wall. I moved the remaining money in our joint account into a personal one and flagged the activity as potential fraud, making it impossible for her to access it without triggering an investigation. As I walked out of the bank, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. Vanessa, just met with my lawyer. Leonard's finished. Thanks for giving me the proof. Let's stay in touch. We might need each other as this unfolds. I replied quickly. You got it. Let me know if you need anything else. Vanessa and I had agreed to stay coordinated, not just to support each other, but to make sure Leonard and Jessica didn't find a way to twist the situation in their favor. It was strange, bonding with someone over mutual betrayal, but I appreciated her no-nonsense approach. She was as determined as I was to see this through. When I got home that evening, Jessica was waiting for me in the living room. She looked disheveled, her face puffy from crying. Tyler, she began, standing up as I walked in. I know you're angry. I know I screwed up, but can we please talk about this? Just us, without lawyers or threats. I didn't even bother to sit down. We've talked enough, I said. I've already started the divorce process. Monica is filing the papers tomorrow. And before you try to pull anything, just know I've frozen the accounts. You won't get another cent from me. Her face twisted in shock and anger. You froze the accounts? Tyler, what am I supposed to do? I can't. That's not my problem, I interrupted. You should have thought about that before you decided to screw me over, literally and figuratively. Jessica started pacing, her voice growing frantic. I made a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. But we've been together for years, Tyler. Doesn't that count for anything? I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, it counts all right. It counts as the time I wasted on someone who didn't value me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've had enough of this conversation. I turned to leave, but her next words stopped me in my tracks. You can't take everything from me, she said, her voice low and venomous. If you think you're going to humiliate me and leave me with nothing, you're wrong. I'll fight you on this, Tyler, and I'll win. I turned back slowly, meeting her glare with one of my own. You already lost, Jessica. You just don't know it yet. That night, I sent Vanessa the divorce lawyer's contact info and updated Chris on what had happened. She's panicking, I said over the phone. And when people panic, they make mistakes. Let's see how far she's willing to go. Chris was quiet for a moment before responding. Tyler, just be careful, man. People like her, when they feel cornered, they can get nasty. Don't underestimate her. I won't, I promised. But deep down, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Jessica wasn't just going to walk away quietly, and neither was Leonard. If they thought this was over, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The next morning, Monica called me with an update. We filed the divorce papers and locked down the assets. If Jessica tries anything, it's already too late. Now we wait for her response. Good, I said, pacing my kitchen. She's already threatened to fight back, but I'm ready for whatever she throws at me. Monica hesitated. Tyler, just be prepared. People like Jessica don't give up easily. She might try to turn this into a circus. It didn't take long for her warning to come true. That afternoon, Jessica stormed into the house. Her usual composed facade was gone, replaced by a raw, desperate anger. Tyler, she shouted, slamming the door behind her. We need to talk. Now. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, my face calm as I looked up from my laptop. About what? About this, she snapped, tossing a crumpled stack of papers onto the table. They were copies of the divorce petition Monica had filed. You really think you're just going to freeze me out? Take everything? You don't get to make that decision alone. I didn't make it alone, I said evenly. You made it for me the moment you started sleeping with Leonard and stealing from me. She flinched but quickly recovered. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Yes, I made a mistake, but this, she gestured wildly at the papers. This is extreme. We can still fix this, Tyler. Don't let a lawyer decide what happens to us. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Fix it? Jessica, there's nothing left to fix. You've been lying to me for months, funneling money into secret accounts, and planning your exit behind my back. This isn't a mistake. It's a betrayal. Her eyes darted around the room, like she was scrambling for a lifeline. I was scared, okay? I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. You were always busy, always distracted. Leonard, he just listened. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Oh, so this is my fault now? Because I worked hard to provide for us? Because I trusted you to be honest? Jessica's voice dropped, softer now, almost pleading. I didn't want it to end like this. I still love you, Tyler. I know I've messed up, but we have years of history together. Doesn't that mean anything? I stood up, towering over her. It means I trusted you, Jessica, and you turned that trust into a weapon. So no, I'm not interested in saving this marriage. I'm interested in making sure you can't hurt me any more than you already have. Her face crumpled, but the tears didn't move me. You don't have to do this, she whispered. Oh, I do, I said, my voice steady. You're not going to manipulate me into backing down. Not this time. Jessica's tears dried up almost instantly, replaced by an icy glare. Fine, she said, her voice cold. You want war, Tyler? You've got it. She turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Jessica didn't waste any time. The next day, I started hearing from mutual friends, texts, calls, even a few DMs, asking me what was going on. Jessica had been reaching out to people, spinning the narrative that I was the problem. According to her, I was controlling, emotionally distant, and paranoid. She even claimed the divorce was my idea because I couldn't handle the pressure of being married. I wasn't surprised. This was classic Jessica. Paint herself as the victim and me as the villain. What did surprise me was how quickly it spread. By the end of the week, people I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me, offering unsolicited advice, or worse, taking her side. One of the messages hit me harder than I expected. It was from Mark, my old college roommate and one of my closest friends. Mark, hey man, Jessica called me. She said you're pushing her into a nasty divorce because you think she's cheating? What's going on? Is this true? I stared at my phone, my blood boiling. Jessica wasn't just trying to protect herself. She was actively assassinating my character. I took a deep breath and replied, Mark, I didn't want to drag you into this, but since she already has, let me set the record straight. She is cheating. I've got the evidence. If you're willing to hear the truth, let me know. Otherwise, I can't stop you from believing her lies. Mark's response was immediate. I want the truth. Call me. I spent the next hour walking Mark through everything, the texts, the photos, the financial transfers. By the time I finished, he was furious. I can't believe her, he said. She sounded so convincing when she called me. I am sorry, Mom. I should have asked you first. It's not your fault, I said. Jessica's good at playing the victim. But trust me, this isn't over. That weekend, I took things into my own hands. If Jessica wanted to play dirty, I wasn't going to sit back and let her smear my name. I started reaching out to people, our closest friends, family members, even co-workers she'd been talking to, and shared the truth. I didn't show them everything. I wasn't trying to humiliate her, just set the record straight. I explained that Jessica had been having an affair for months, that she'd been siphoning money from our accounts, and that I had proof to back it all up. Some people were shocked. Others apologized for believing her lies. A few were reluctant to take sides, but I didn't care. The point was to stop her campaign of lies before it did any more damage. By the end of the week, the tide was turning. Word spread that I had the receipts, literal and metaphorical, and Jessica's story started falling apart. Meanwhile, Leonard wasn't faring much better. Vanessa had gone nuclear, filing for divorce and exposing his affair to his workplace. Apparently, Leonard's boss didn't take kindly to employees having messy public scandals, especially when they involved a client's wife. Chris called me one night, laughing as he shared what he'd found online. Dude, Leonard's firm posted an announcement today. They're conducting an internal investigation into behavior that violates their code of ethics. Guess who it's about? I grinned. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. By the next week, Leonard was out of a job, his marriage in shambles, and his reputation ruined. Vanessa had even filed a restraining order after he showed up drunk at her house, begging for another chance. Jessica, of course, tried to distance herself from the fallout. She started calling me more frequently, leaving long voicemails about how sorry she was and how this wasn't what she wanted. But I wasn't buying it. I ignored every call, every text, every weak attempt at reconciliation. One evening, Monica called with an update. Jessica's lawyer reached out, she said. She's asking for mediation instead of going to court. My guess? She knows she can't win this. Good, I said. Let's make sure she walks away with exactly what she deserves. Nothing. Monica chuckled. You've got it. But stay sharp. People like Jessica always have a backup plan. And she was right. Jessica wasn't done yet. Just when I thought Jessica had finally realized she'd lost, she pulled one last desperate move. It came out of nowhere. A formal letter from her lawyer delivered to my house. The letter alleged that I had been emotionally abusive during our marriage and hinted that Jessica might seek alimony as part of the settlement. The audacity made my jaw drop. After everything she'd done, cheating, siphoning money, lying, she was now trying to paint herself as a victim to squeeze even more out of me. I called Monica immediately, my voice shaking with anger. You're not going to believe this. She's accusing me of abuse. She's trying to get alimony. Monica didn't sound surprised. This is a scare tactic. Her lawyer knows she has no real leverage, so they're trying to intimidate you into a more generous settlement. Don't take the bait. What do we do? I asked, pacing my living room. We fight it, of course, she said calmly. The evidence we've already gathered will crush any claim she tries to make. Abuse cases require proof, and Jessica doesn't have any. If anything, this move makes her look worse. It's a desperate attempt to muddy the waters. Despite Monica's confidence, I couldn't shake the frustration. Jessica was willing to drag my name through the mud just to save herself. I decided it was time to fight back harder. That night, I logged into the server Chris had set up and combed through Jessica's messages again. I was looking for something, anything, that could prove her allegations were false and show how manipulative she truly was. It didn't take long to find what I needed. There were multiple texts to Leonard where Jessica bragged about how clueless I was, how easy it would be to leave me, and how she'd get what she deserved once the divorce was over. One message even said, Tyler's such a pushover. He'll cave if I push him hard enough. Watch. I sent the screenshots to Monica, who called me back within minutes. This is exactly what we needed, she said. Not only does it contradict her claims, but it shows her true intentions. If she wants to take this to court, we'll bury her with her own words. Over the next few days, Monica filed a counterclaim, arguing that Jessica's accusations were baseless and designed to manipulate the legal process. She included the texts as evidence, along with everything else we'd collected. Jessica's lawyer responded almost immediately, proposing a private mediation to avoid unnecessary escalation. It was clear they knew they couldn't win. At the mediation, Jessica sat across from me, her lawyer by her side. She looked exhausted, like the weight of her lies was finally catching up to her. Her lawyer started with a weak pitch about mutual respect and fairness, but Monica wasn't having it. We're prepared to go to court, Monica said firmly. And if we do, we'll be presenting the following evidence: proof of infidelity, financial fraud, and text messages that undermine your client's claims of emotional abuse. If you'd like to proceed, we're happy to let a judge decide. Jessica's lawyer looked visibly uncomfortable. He leaned over to whisper something to her, but she shook her head, clearly frustrated. I just want this to be over, Jessica said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Then agree to the terms, Monica replied. No alimony, no additional claims. Tyler keeps what's rightfully his, and you walk away clean. That's the best deal you're going to get. Jessica's hands clenched into fists, but she didn't argue. Fine, she muttered. By the time we left the mediation, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in months. It was over. Jessica had nothing left to fight with, and I was finally free from her web of lies. Monica patted me on the shoulder as we walked to the parking lot. You handled this well, she said. A lot of people would have lost their cool, but you played it smart. Now you can move on. I nodded, the weight of everything slowly lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just about winning, it was about reclaiming my life. But as I drove home, I couldn't help but wonder, what would Jessica do now that her house of cards had collapsed? A week after the mediation, I was officially divorced. The papers came in the mail, a final reminder that Jessica and I were no longer tied to each other. It felt strange at first, an emptiness I wasn't prepared for. But it wasn't sadness. It was relief. The storm was over, and I could finally breathe. Jessica moved out of the house almost immediately, taking what little she was allowed to keep. Watching her pack up her things was surreal. She didn't say much, and I didn't either. There was nothing left to say. Before she left, she turned to me one last time, her expression a mix of bitterness and regret. "I never wanted it to end like this, Tyler," she said quietly. "You made your choice," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Now you have to live with it." She nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek before walking out the door. The days that followed were unexpectedly peaceful. The house felt quieter, calmer, like the weight of her lies had finally been lifted. I started focusing on myself again, hitting the gym, reconnecting with friends, and rediscovering hobbies I'd let fall by the wayside. Vanessa and I stayed in touch. She was going through her own divorce from Leonard, and we often exchanged updates on how things were unfolding. Apparently, Leonard was struggling to find work after being fired, and his reputation in their community had taken a massive hit. "He's a mess," Vanessa told me over the phone one evening. "Honestly, I don't even feel sorry for him. He made his bed. Now he can lie in it." "Sounds like him and Jessica have a lot in common," I replied. Vanessa laughed. "They deserve each other." One day, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store. It was the first time I'd seen her since she moved out. She looked different, worn down, like life hadn't been kind to her since the divorce. She was standing in the produce aisle, staring at a bunch of bananas like she wasn't really there. She noticed me before I could walk away. "Tyler," she said, her voice soft. "Jessica," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. For a moment, it looked like she was about to say something, but then she just shook her head. "I hope you're doing okay," she said finally. "I am," I said, meeting her eyes. "Better than I've been in a long time." She nodded, her lips pressing into a thin line. "That's good. You deserve that." And with that, she turned and walked away. Months passed, and the dust settled. Life didn't just go back to normal. It became something better. I wasn't living in the shadow of Jessica's betrayal anymore. I was free to rebuild, to create something new. I found out later through mutual friends that Jessica and Leonard didn't last. Their perfect love crumbled under the weight of reality, and Leonard apparently ghosted her after losing his job. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. Jessica was just a chapter in my life, one that I had finally closed for good. As I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset with a cold drink in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Reflection. If I've learned anything from this experience, it's that trust is the foundation of everything. Once it's broken, there's no going back. I gave Jessica every chance to be honest, and she chose lies instead. If you're ever in a situation where your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. Don't let someone gaslight you into doubting yourself. And most importantly, don't be afraid to walk away from someone who doesn't value you. You deserve better. I know I do. And now, I'm finally living like it.